You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Catholic Mama podcast. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn, and today we're going to talk about theology of the body and how to teach that to your children. A very interesting topic that I have yet to really think about for my own kids, and I really need to start. So I'm so happy to have Maura from Modern Catholic Mom here to join me. Hello, Maura.
Hello, how are you, Christine?
I am good. Thank you so much for joining me and doing this.
You're very welcome.
I know we banted around a couple of different ideas of what to talk about today, but I got to say, I'm very excited about theology of the body. I came into the Catholic faith later in life, as my listeners will know. And it wasn't until maybe 6 months or a year in, which I'm only like 2 years into being Catholic anyway, that I read Theology of the Body. And it finally, I didn't realize how much, I don't know, like a pagan or hypersexualized or something, a lot of wrong ideas about the human body and what we're called to, I was still holding on to. And so I'm excited to hear your thoughts about theology of the body, especially when it comes to raising children with that in mind. So, but before we get into that, for anyone who may not be familiar with you and Modern Catholic Mom, would you mind telling the listeners who you are?
Sure. My name is Moira. I am married to John. We have 6 children from now entering into the adult world of 18 all the way down to 4. We are homeschooling and traditional schooling, I guess, not traditional schooling, but more like a hybrid. We have a hybrid approach for our kids. And I've been Catholic all my life. And I really... I feel really blessed because even at a young age, I had questions about being Catholic. And I really kind of went on a journey even in 5th grade because I was in an anti-Catholic environment about my faith. And so I went on for studies and I studied philosophy and theology and great books, which led me to teaching for a year, and that led me to starting a chastity program because I had been working with kids and kind of seeing the devastation that was happening in their lives because so many messages were just being pushed on them. And I was teaching theology, and for me, I was like, wow, this is like a big obstacle for kids right now because I saw it leading to depression and really negative relationships and a lot of sadness in these kids' lives, and I really love them. So anyways, from that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit here and try to teach them theology. I'm going to actually leave my teaching position, and I'm going to start trying to teach and share about the freedom of chastity and the freedom of living your life in a way that's not like you're not enslaved to worries and fears and all the things that come with the sexual relationships outside of a committed marital relationship. So,
how important?
Anyways.
I got to tell you, I grew up in a very new age pagan type mentality. And if anybody ever says like, oh, what you see on TV or what you read in magazines, it doesn't really affect kids that much. Or, if anybody says that, I am the poster child for that being not true. I absorbed everything that I read on every magazine. We don't shop at regular grocery stores very often. We either go to like Costco or a health food store. And I'm kind of happy that my kids are not in line looking at like the headlines for Cosmo magazine because all that stuff affected me horribly. Yes. And I was actually just thinking about this recently, how somebody in passing had just said something about people who are spiritually advanced tend to be spiritually open or sexually open as well. And I was like, well, I'm new age. Like I consider myself spiritually advanced. So I guess that means this. And the idea of chastity just was not even broached, besides my parents telling me I couldn't date until I was 16, which doesn't really answer any questions.
Right.
But like I
Right.
said
No,
before we got on we started hitting record, I don't know how to do this as a Catholic parent now, that we converted a couple of years ago. So this is all super fascinating to me. And I'm sure, I mean, not every person that listens to this podcast knows what to do with their children either. So thank you.
right. Oh, no, you're welcome. And, one thing I would say is, first of all, it is very intimidating. Like, I used to travel around the country and give chastity talks. And it really was it was easy in respect to, it wasn't always easy to give a talk, but there was a comfort level there. And then when you are with your own children, I think it's really important. I had to kind of reevaluate, how am I going to teach this to my own kids? And one thing I would say first off is, as a parent, don't just think of like the talk. Think of it as like a series of conversations you will have with your children throughout their lives that will prepare them after, they've left your home to be ready to thrive in this kind of sex-saturated culture. And they'll be able to navigate the pitfalls. And I really do think it's not just one talk you have. I really think it's about sharing with these kids their dignity, their worth, why we treat others with respect, and also just like the freedom in living the life that God has, basically, he's guiding us through our church. And personally, I've found that to lead to incredible freedom. And on the other side of that, I've seen those who have not chosen to live that way lead into a lot of slavery and bondage and sadness. So what I would say is, like, the truth is on our side. God has given us this guidelines, I guess you could say, but they're guidelines for our happiness. And it doesn't just have to be one talk. I think it's about starting to have really good communication with our kids from a really young age. Another thing I was thinking about as I was getting ready to talk to you is that, like, the number one thing I would say as a parent or as a mom is work on your own prayer life. And I know that sounds like, okay, but let's get to talking about theology of the body. But I really think I have found in my own life that getting up and starting my day with prayer has given me the words I need for my kids when they have the questions that need to be answered. So even when I haven't had the answers, I have been amazed by the way God, who loves our children so much, has, like, given me the words that he wanted them to hear. And so in preparing to talk to your kids and raise them in this culture, I would say number one has to begin with your own prayer life, and just get ready to see how God's going to work through that.
Yeah, I got to say, personally, I wake up, I'm an early bird, and I get up early every single morning, so long as I wasn't up in the middle of the night too much with a small child. and I pray, and a lot of times every morning I pray in Maura, and the intention for that particular prayer is, Mary, make me more like you. And I got to say, in saying that prayer and just and saying my rosary in the morning, just starting my day with that, focuses my entire self towards God, so that even when either the kids come with difficult questions or just a difficult attitude that day, I feel already more aligned. So that makes total sense, that if you're going to be tackling these these overarching themes of humanity, whether or not you intend to or not, when you wake up in the morning, that makes total sense that would be important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, another thing I would say is, when you've got young kids, there is this sense of, like, everything you do as a mom is beginning to reveal to your children the beauty of what it is to be a woman. And I think sometimes we make this much more of a, like, I don't think we fully understand just how beautiful and unique it is to be a woman. And obviously it's unique to be a man, but, like, as a woman, sometimes maybe because we don't understand just how special our relationship with our own children is. And our own children. Yeah. And so I would say, like, another example of just, like, when they're young, is for me, I breastfed my babies. So I had a lot of time with them. Now, you don't have to be a breastfeeding mother to point out to children other breastfeeding mothers. Or you hang out in groups and a mom is grabbing their child and breastfeeding. And I know this sounds funny, but it's just a simple little fact like, hey, you know what those things are for? Yeah, there's beauty. They are beautiful. The form is and function is there. Like, God has made a woman's body beautiful, and yet there's like a function to this beauty. Like there's great purpose to it. And I mean, I know it sounds funny, but honestly, when a child and a boy, sees his mom, oh, and she's nursing the baby or they're nursing, like they start to get, oh yeah, that's what those things are for. And then, and I know that sounds funny, but it's kind of like, yeah, we should not be so, like I was always a discreet nurser, but my kids knew what I was doing. You know what I'm saying?
Sure,
like I had a nursing scarf and I would, be out in public, but like I have a scarf. And the thing is, it was like, in the home, obviously you're it's a lot more casual, but my point is that you don't have to be like, you can be modest, but also these kids understand what's going on. And there's this beauty. I think there's something so beautiful to say, wow, like God has given me as a mother everything my child needs to thrive. And it's beautiful. And you wean this child and you know what? Like you draw back on those resources again. God is giving you as a mother everything you need to help your child thrive, not just survive in this world, but thrive. So like, I think getting in touch with who we are as women is very, very important, and learning to recognize, the beauty of, the feminine soul, is very important, because I think it gives us this sense of confidence when we're talking to our kids, about just the beauty of who God created them to be. And part of that is discovering that in ourselves,
I gotta say, for me, reading Theology of the Body itself, and then also Humana Vitae really helped. Is there any other things that are resources that you could suggest to women who may feel like they're adrift in this area?
Yes. Okay. So at some point, I will share with you a link that I wrote. It was a blog post. It said, talking to your kids about sex. And there's a couple links there. One is the Vatican does have like a site with all the talks that John Paul II gave on theology of the body throughout the years in his Wednesday audiences. So you could literally read that. Also, there's other writings too, like Mulieris Dignitatum, and there's a few others, but what I would say is to kind of bring it down to bite-sized pieces. There's a group of podcasts also in that, post that I wrote, and the podcast is a priest named Father Ricardo, and it's just a series of talks that he gave on theology of the body. And I think, some people might be intimidated by just reading what John Paul II wrote, because there's a lot of it. Mm-hmm. But I do think that I find his writing was not that difficult to understand. Like, there's a lot of it, but you could take little pieces of it.
Yep.
Some people also recommend Christopher West. Now, personally, like, I would definitely say that he sometimes gets into details that I wouldn't have my kids reading. And again, he's got a lot of great stuff, but personally, I would not have my kids necessarily reading his stuff, because he does, as I said, get into a lot of detail that maybe too much information for for kids to read, but some people have found him very helpful. So, Jason Everett, I know, has given a lot of talks for kids, and he has a lot of resources for kids that as a parent you might read and then share with your kids. But, on a kind of a timeline, what I would say for a parent is, your kids best. So when you should get more into details for your kids. But in general, we do a 5th grade anatomy for our kids. And then around 8th grade, it's more like the very what some would traditionally call the talk, more the biology of it. But for girls, even around 5th or 6th grade, it'd be more like talking to them about cycles and things that they need to be prepared for,
Sure.
So that's why I think a series of talks is good, because you can not overwhelm them with too much information that they're really not ready for. So like, I feel like that's why I like breaking it into different talks.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
The anatomy is one, and can kind of prep people, like girls, for cycles and all of these things they need to be ready for, and understanding their own body. And personally, I always would talk to the girls, and John would always talk to the boys. And then also, I would say, just don't be afraid to just talk about different topics. And I personally, as a little, if it's very hard, I just have to say, you just have to talk to your kids and talk to them before somebody else does.
Yeah, absolutely. Offer that if you're suffering through that, offer that suffering up then. Because I think my mom, I remember one day she called me and started talking. I was like, oh, I know all about that. And she went, oh, phew. And that was the end of it. But I had heard from like a 13-year-old girl next door. So I clearly did not have top-notch education on this. But I will say, I don't know if you've noticed this as a whole, we've started our homeschooling journey just this year, but because we are homeschooling, it seems as if, I'm hoping, that because our children look to my husband and I as the teachers as well, that
Right.
They are, we're with each other all the time. So big topics and little ones come up all the time. And I'm hoping that this will continue, that they
Yes.
look to us to be the leaders anyway, more naturally, rather than somebody else right away.
Yes. No, I think so. And I do think it's like, I do think there's different approaches. If your kids are at home, it's a lot easier to follow when you kind of think they're ready. If they're in a school setting, which will have these conversations, even if you pull your kids out, they're going to hear from their friends,
Mm-hmm.
So you really should keep in touch with your school and find out when these conversations are going to happen. And I would say, try to be the first one to talk to them about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay. So So I guess, what you're saying with, if you are, say, nursing a breastfeeding mom, then your children will naturally see, what those are for, what breasts are for. And then as they get older, hopefully they'll make the connection though, sex makes babies and breasts are used for feeding those babies. But then, so you're saying anatomy, for boys and girls around 5th grade. Girls, you might continue on a little bit just to talk about menstruation and stuff like that, around that same time, but then having what, you would traditionally call the talk around the age of 13.
Yeah, or like some people do it before confirmation,
Sure,
again,
okay.
you need to know your kids. And I think if you are spending a lot of time with them, it's going to be easier. But also if they're in school, it's going to be easier to know when these conversations are going to be coming up. So I would say it'll give you like, okay, that's my deadline, because that's when they're going to start covering that in class.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, with whether, if you put your kids into, say, children's liturgy of the word, or they're getting some kind of religious education at church, it's still the onus, even they're getting it elsewhere, the onus is still on the parents to be the teachers. So for religion, for sexual education, you can't just delegate this to somebody else. You really have to be really hands-on.
Yes. And, and like as a word of advice, every parent is different, like it's different people have different levels of comfort on talking about these things. So I would say one little parent, like a mom hack, might be you go for a long drive with your daughter and have a conversation where you don't literally have to stare at her in the face or in the eyes, or you know what I'm saying? Like, and then some parents might be completely comfortable looking their kids in the eyes, but it might make it even more comfortable for your kids you're talking, but you're not like staring them in the eyes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is true. I've seen research that shows the best place to have a big conversation with a spouse or a kid or wherever is in the car, because you are close together, but you don't have to look at each other. But you're still, you're still in an intimate, enclosed setting where, it says, hey, I care about you. We're in this together. But yeah, the research will back you up on that.
Okay, that's interesting. Good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things that might help with somebody to say, listen, we're going to do something nice. We're going to go out for a nice, lunch or something. And we're going to have this conversation and be open to questions, and you probably won't get any. So because you probably won't get any, then, really, I think it's so important, like using the dinner table as a place where and again, you don't have to be, once you've given very specific talks, you can talk about like so many different topics in like a way that protects all the different age levels and just really gets kids thinking about like more important topics in life and, and what God's calling them to, and, the beauty of, husbands and wives and the way they can complement each other, and the way men and women complement each other, just like on a bigger scale, looking like part of what John Paul II spoke about was the complementarity of the sexes. And that idea that like we have strengths and weaknesses, and like John and I, it is so apparent, like where my strengths are his weaknesses, and where his strengths are my weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And so like we point it out all the time. We're like, listen guys, we failed the focus test, which they used to do in the Catholic Church, like to prepare for marriage. Like, you'd see levels of compatibility. And John and I were like, really, like basically the deacon was like, I've never seen lower levels of compatibility in my life. And we say this to the kids because we're like, but look, I know, we have our arguments, and we always have our arguments in front of our kids. We're not one of those people that runs off quietly somewhere. But we are like, but we love each other, and truly our faith and the way we can appreciate how different we are. Like I appreciate how different John is from me. And I know he appreciates how different I am from him, because we really do help each other in our common goal, of like raising our kids and getting them to heaven and trying to get each other to heaven, And so, I think theology of the body is a lot more than just like reducing it down to a sex talk. It's so much more than that. It's really about discovering our dignity in God's eyes. Discovering his very particular call in our heart, like us, like very specific calls, and it's teaching our kids to help, open themselves up to God so they can truly live beautiful, happy, fulfilled lives. So again, I just always like to say, just keep talking to your kids about so many things, and educate yourself a bit so you can start to recognize this truth that is in us, that this theology of the body that is true. It is a true reality that our recent popes have really brought to the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said, that this is where real freedom is. And anybody who will tell you otherwise, and that's the devil talking, because that's a big lie. And it leads to being enslaved to this world.
Yes. Yes. And this is another aside, but there are some programs that are being given to schools for free. And these programs are basically sponsored by groups that pair up with like Trojan condoms and Planned Parenthood, and groups that stand to make a lot of money off of our kids having sex outside of marriage. So I think it's really important for parents to understand that why they need to talk to their own kids is because we actually want them to have a happy, fulfilled life. And there are people in charge of free sex education courses that actually want kids to engage in sex and are actually preparing them to go behind parents' backs, to learn about their rights, to not have things revealed to their own parents. And this is as minors. These are people going into schools and dealing with minors and actually giving them very dangerous information. So it is really important that we are not afraid to talk about this with our kids, because say your kids aren't in school, well, their friends will be, or the people they go to college with will be, and it's like we need to prepare our kids to have a really good reason for why they believe what they believe, and because their job is also to help keep their friends out of very negative relationships that are very detrimental to their lives. So anyways, I think it's also a charity thing. It's a charity to share with your kids so that they can share with their peers a different way to live than is really being like pushed on them, forced on them before they're ready to discern. The young kids are being, really pushed on to live lives that are very dangerous, and like statistics really back up what I'm saying here, and yet these people are being allowed free access to our kids in school.
Yes, I've seen some of the documents straight out of the sex ed programs in various states, and wow, I would be mortified to be somebody teaching that to such a young group or to anybody. But it's
yes.
50 Shades of Grey in the classroom. It's not that different.
Yeah. Well, and two, the other irony is with the Me Too movement, it's like I've seen some of these too, because there have been places here. Hey, if you pay taxes, you are welcome to go to these school board meetings and speak up. And there are programs that they're literally having possibly 17 or 18-year-old guys with girls saying very things that would and should make a lot of 13-year-old freshman girls very uncomfortable, and yet they're being forced to have these mock conversations that is really violating to these young girls. So there's a real desire to break down a sense of decency and boundaries that were put up to protect especially our daughters. And so I really think this is this is a big issue. It's a big issue because girls are being asked to bear the burden of a sex-saturated culture. They're being asked to pop the carcinogen pill, the type 1 carcinogen cancer-causing pill. They're being asked to do this. Don't have hormones in your meat, but pump this in your body every day. They're being asked to show up and, then it's your problem. Get rid of this problem that you have now because you're engaged in this activity. And often girls are also the ones who end up with many more instances of the sexually transmitted diseases truly affecting them in more serious and lifelong ways. So I do think if we really want to be pro-woman, we really need to prepare our girls to speak up amongst their friends, to protect their friends from this culture that is really subjugating women in very unfair ways.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I got to be honest. My teen years were spent in much less than wholesome activities. And looking back now, and even during it, I would have convinced myself that I was acting for my own self-interest and I was in charge, but I wasn't. I certainly wasn't. I was serving the pop culture gods. It's so backwards and so wrong, and really, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of feminism, of toxic femininity, but it really takes the worst attributes of humanity and tries to tell women or tries to make women say that that's their right to do.
Yeah. And the one thing I'd say about that is that's the other thing. No matter what anyone's life path has been, first of all, any parent has the right to share as much or as little of their own life choices as they choose. And they can choose to share that when they think it's right, and they can choose not to share it, and I think that's so important. Like, it does not matter any of the choices a parent has made. It doesn't matter, if they've lived, a certain lifestyle and now they're turning and asking their kids, hey, there's another way here. It's not hypocritical to share the truth with our kids because we've learned from our own mistakes, you know? And I feel some parents do feel like, well, it's not really my place to say because
Sure.
I haven't lived this way. And so what right do I have to tell my kids to? And it's like, well, you have every right because you are their primary educator and you love them and you want them to be free. You know, you want them to be happy. You want them to live a life without all of these burdens, you know? So, parents have every right. And also I found some beautiful testimonies of men and women who live these lives and like they're like, first of all, if we want to talk about pure hearts, these people have it. And like that is the grace of confession. That is the grace of God working in the church. And like I have seen these souls where I'm like, wow, they are so much more like pure of heart than I am. These people are amazing. And they have lived very wild, you know, lives. So, God makes all things new. And I think as a parent, don't ever feel like you don't have a place to say this because you absolutely do.
I love that. You know, I've said it a couple times recently in different places, but I've been reading The Life of Christ by Fulton Sheen. And in it, he, is going through all the different aspects of Jesus's life that we see in the Gospels. And he explains the Samaritan woman at the well. And one of the things that I just love so much that I read was, you know, millions of people have white grace, and that is knowing the presence of God. But so many millions of people understand black grace, and that is the absence of God. And the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman who had multiple husbands and was with a man who wasn't her husband currently when she met Jesus, would not have been able to call him Savior had it not been for the black grace. So, you know, God can draw straight with crooked lines. So I think that's a wonderful point that you're making, that even if you personally lived a wild past, you can call your children to a better one.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, actually, I did want to ask too, because you saying that touched an idea. If you have, say, a high schooler or middle schooler who is in public school and has already gotten talks, and the parents are just now realizing that they want to start, engaging with them in this way. Do you have any advice for people who didn't start young with their kids?
Right. Okay. Well, that's a very good question. I think I still feel like, we have deep conversations around the dinner table, and then we have conversations when the little ones have like fallen asleep. You know, I would just say, don't be afraid to bring up the topics. Like and it could even be prefaced with, listen, I am sorry I have not discussed this with you before. I feel like you deserve to hear these words from me. And so I'm hoping you'll be open to me talking to you right now because I love you and I want you to have this path to freedom. And so please forgive me for not speaking up sooner, but I want to speak up now because I want you to have this information, you know, and then just have the talk done. You know what I'm saying? And like, or have that long drive into it, but like, let kids know how precious they are to you. And, you know, I bumble around thoughts and ideas all the time. I do not get to things quickly, but I figure after, 18 or 19 years in the house, there'll be a few nuggets that they can take with them somewhere. So, again, I know it sounds funny. I just keep thinking, talk. Just, it doesn't matter. Like, forget the past, forget where we messed up, forget what we neglected, and just begin, and then, there are resources. I mean, like I said, there's the Jason Everett, who I think do a great job with like high school age. Your high schooler might be open to reading a book like that. So, but okay, now this is another side. This really family rosary. I mean, I know again, this is about theology of the body, but Mary, I would definitely recommend really encouraging kids to do a consecration to Mary. Like, do it with them. Like, choose, before they leave your house, before the age of 18, like do this with them. One Advent, one whatever. And like, it can be casual. You can read through this stuff or do it for a Lent or whatever, but get Mary, like, if their hand is holding Jesus and Mary, like, I think they're going to be okay. And really, as a parent, that's your job. Your job is to prepare them to leave your house. And you can't always be there, but Jesus can. And he has given us a mother who will always be there to look out for the details. So hand in Jesus and Mary's, and I feel like our kids are ready to go, you know? So, a true consecration to Mary is beautiful. Family rosary. I think purity is a side effect of spending time with Jesus and Mary.
That's a really good point.
You know, spend time with them. And again, today is Our Lady of Fatima, you know, I don't know when this will air, but it's Our Lady of Fatima. And the final battle is over the family. And I hope if anything what this quarantine has taught us, that we are way too busy for our own good, you know, and family life has suffered a lot because of how busy we are, even with good things. So keep doing the good things, but maybe not as many good things. You know, make sure we end our day with the rosary. And the kids fall asleep pretty easily after that. Like, I don't know, and I think it's a great way to end your day. Sometimes though, life is busy, and so we'll do it in cars. Everyone does it. There's kids in cars praying there, and there's John, you know, praying off where he's coming back late from work or whatever. So if we can't do it together, we do it apart. But it's wonderful if you can get that to be a habit that you have as a family, because I really think it's kind of a big help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was just thinking how one of the shepherd children did say that the final battle was with marriage and family. And if we strengthen the family unit in total and aren't afraid to have these talks, I mean, we shouldn't be afraid to have any talk about any part of human existence, or be afraid to tackle any sin. We need that to strengthen us to fight the good fight. So that makes total sense to me. I love everything that you have said, and this makes me feel a lot more confident in my abilities as I go forward with my children aging. But before we go, where can you be found online?
So you can find my blog is moderncatholicmom.com. I am on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is, I think, just Modern Catholic Mom at Instagram, or at Modern Catholic Mom.
Oh, you know, I will put the link. I'll put a link in the show notes so that I'll make it easy for people to click through.
Yes. So I'm on all of that. And, so that's where people can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maura. This is really, really interesting. And I know it'll be interesting for my listeners as well. Anybody who happens to be listening to this right now, if you have any follow-up questions that you want to have tackled about any of this topic or any others, there's also going to be a link in the show notes where you can submit a question. And of course, I'll put the links into where you can find Maura online and ask her directly too, because I think you're much more the expert than I am when it comes to this stuff. But wow, how important. I tell you, like I said before, I've lived the opposite life, and it's not the freedom that people would have, you know, mainstream secular society would have you believe. So I am so happy that, one, like you said, God makes everything new, and that now I feel a little bit more confident. So I appreciate.
Good. Oh yes, 100%. Really, I just your interest in it is that's number one too. Just so God bless you and all the moms out there. We're all trying our best, and I really think that we just need to keep trying and praying. And I just see God stepping in when we fail. You know, so
that's right. Because we're not doing this alone.
No, we're not. 100%. There are kids, but they're his too, you know, and right. That also just the final words I would say is don't be afraid. Just love your kids and don't be afraid, and put them in God's hands and keep doing it. Keep putting their hands, keep introducing them to Christ through the sacraments, you know, getting them to confession, Mary, and then don't be afraid. We have nothing to fear. We and it might be a hard road sometimes with some of our kids, but God is there. He is loving these kids, and He's going to bring them to the finish line. As long as we are trying our very best and we're really just putting them in God's hands and just trusting Him. It's that trust that we have to have in a world that doesn't always, I don't know, it's not always supporting us in our goals. But yes,
that's for
be
sure.
not afraid.
Awesome. Be not afraid. Amen. That's how I'm going to end this. All right, everyone. Thank you again, Maura. And until next time, everyone. Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy to understand grown-up answers, the pared down but not talked down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.